It's Sunday night, and we're in a study on prophecy. Now, I'm trying to teach you about the man of sin and who he is. There is a beast world system, and the beast is a Babylonian system. It is a Babylon system. Now, most people think that Babylon is the Roman Catholic Church. They think it's Roman Catholicism. Well, it is, but it's not just Roman Catholicism. Remember that the beast was a world system, and it developed into Roman Catholicism. And Roman Catholicism has developed into a worldwide system of tolerance and of self-worship. The only problem in the Bible is self-worship. That's the only problem anywhere. Anytime a man invented a god, he simply made him a god, wrote his laws on the hearts of that God so that God could instruct him the way he wanted to be instructed. That's all Baal in the Grove and Shemash and Molech and all these gods were. They were the God that man had invented. Well, if a man invents a God, that's just his own idea who God is. He makes God in his image, doesn't he? Instead of God making us in his image, we make him in our image. And, of course, there is a beast world system, and it began at Babel. Babel is the beginning of the Babylonian system. It is the beginning of the Babylonian Empire. The empire doesn't start here at Babel, but that's the city. That's the city. That's where men begin to rebel against God. When men build cities, that's where they start rebelling because they get them an identity. They get them a national identity, and they get pride, and they get lifted up in it. It's the same thing when a man says, I'll make my own system. I'll make my own little kingdom, my own little world with my business. It's the same thing that he does. Well, Babel, what followed Babel was Babylon many years later, centuries later, Babylon. And then, of course, Babel was just reinstituting Garden of Eden worship. That was the tree worship. And then Babylon, what followed Babylon was Persia, Grecian Empire. Not the Persian Greece, the Persian Mede Empire. The Persian Mede Empire, that was a dual empire. That's why it was represented as a two-horned ram in the 8th chapter of Daniel. And then the Persian Mede Empire was overthrown by Greece. And this is called the beast because it's represented in the form of beast, the lion, Babylonian lion, the Persian bear, and the Grecian leopard. And this is the system that, this is the beast. It is a system. It is not a man. Now, what we're headed towards right now is another world system. Now, Babylon mothered it all, so each one of these systems is just a follow-up of the previous system. Persia is just a follow-up of Babylon. Greece is a follow-up of Persia. And when they would take over one another, when Persia overthrew Babylon, they took up all the land area and took more land area in. And they also kept the same gods, the tree gods, the sun gods, under different names. They were nothing but Nimrod and Semiramis, his mother. And then when Greece rose up under Alex the Great, this was the beast that overthrew the Persian Medes. And then when Alexander the Great died, they had a special last night on TV on the death of Alexander the Great, trying to prove or disprove that he had been poisoned. Did anybody see that? Yeah, that was interesting because they couldn't ever come to the conclusion if he had been poisoned or not, and that it may have been one of the people close to him that had poisoned him. I kind of feel like it may have been Seleucus that had him poisoned, because Seleucus was one of his generals. Of course, when 4 generals took over his empire, Seleucus was one of the generals that took over the majority of his empire. And then you had Lysachimus, Lysachimus, and you had Cassander, and you had Ptolemy. Now these were the Ptolemies. We think of Egypt when we think of the Ptolemies, because that's why this general, he received Egypt as part of his inheritance in this situation, in Castor and Lysachamus. They got other sections of the world. And Seleucus ended up with more than all three of these others put together. He got more of the empire than those three put together. So this is the man who became the powerhouse that took over the Grecian Empire. Well, Seleucus was, it was like saying Caesar. When Julius Caesar was the emperor of Rome, after Julius Caesar died, they simply took his last name and called the rest of them by the same last name: Augustus Caesar, Tiberius Caesar, Claudius Caesar, and so forth, Caligula Caesar. They all had that Caesar on their name. Well, Seleucus, that was the Syrians, not us Syrians. Huh? Did somebody say something? Okay, that was the Syrians. The key to his empire was Syria, and the Seleucians were here in Syria. So from then on, all the Seleucians they'd name them something Seleucus, and later on they got to naming them Antiochus. Antiochus. And you had many different Antiochus. You had Antiochus the Great, Antiochus the God, Antiochus Epiphanes, and the list goes on. So when you find an Antiochus, he was a Seleucian king, or a king of Syria. Now, the two men that keep battling it out with each other, the two men that keep battling it out is the Ptolemies and the Seleucians. Seleucus was the Syrians, and the Ptolemies were in Egypt. Well, the Syrians, when they go down to Egypt, guess where they have to go? All this brown in here, that's all desert. You can't travel in that. So the only road to Egypt is right through Israel, and then they have to go some desert here. But the only road to Egypt is going down through Israel, where they'll be trampled underfoot. So what we're talking about is the Seleucian kings, are particularly Antiochus. Now, when you get into the man of sin is the man who will be ruling the world beast system at the end of time. Man of sin, he's got many names: Gog, son of perdition, and the list goes on and on. Many names for the man of sin. This is the man who will head up the beast. Now, how does the beast come about at the end of time? Well, of course, when Rome comes along, they are actually subjugating or putting under their feet or under their rule these generals here. And the one that they have the hardest time with, guess what, is Seleucus. He's the man that keeps rising up and rebelling against the Roman Empire, and he's trying to build the Seleucian Empire to a point where he can attack Rome and overtake Rome. That's what he wants to do. But in the Bible, as we look at this man, he is the Old Testament picture of the New Testament man of sin. That's who he is. So everything that he does over here in the Old Testament, we're going to find this is what's happening in the New Testament at the end of time. We're talking about the 70th week of Daniel's 70 week. Now, there's something that comes about in that time period. Now, of course, we know that what the 70 weeks are for, because Israel went after Baal in the grove, God scattered them over the face of the earth, and there's 70 years in Babylon, and for 490 years, or 70 sets, 70 times 7 of these sabbatical years that they never kept. They went after Baal in the grove. They never kept their sabbatical years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Every 7 years they're supposed to let the land lie fallow because of their greed, and they didn't want to leave the land alone. They said, we'll fix us another god, Baal in the grove. That's Hercules and Venus, or the fire and the tree goddess. So God scatters them over the earth, and he says, when you do not repent after I take you out of there and leave you in Babylon for 70 years, I'll measure out these 77s or 70 weeks of Daniel 9, 24 through 27, And I measured out this way, from the going forth of the commandment in Nehemiah, the 2nd chapter, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem, which comes about in Nehemiah 2, unto Messiah the Prince, which will be when Jesus comes into Jerusalem on the young colt of an ass. He comes in on Nisan 10. That's when the lamb is taken, and he's taken and kept for 4 days, and that would be at Nisan 14. Nisan 14, and he keeps him to Nisan 14, and then for 4 days, and then Jesus is crucified on Nisan 14, and that is the Passover. And of course, Jesus is the Prince. Well, from the going forth that commandment to restore and build Jerusalem to Messiah the Prince will be 7 weeks, 62 weeks. 2 weeks. And of course, that y'all be able to quote this by heart now. A score is 20, 3 scores 60, 2 plus 7 is 69 weeks of years. And then 69 times 7, that is 483 years will have passed. And what we're looking for is the last 70th week of Daniel. Now, what we're going to be talking about in this 70th week is the things that the man of sin, the head of the beast system. Well, how does the beast come into being? How does it come into being? It comes into being because Rome, the Roman Empire, they have a fire worship system. They worship Mithra. Mithra is their chief god. His birthday is December the 25th, and that's why they brought that into church. This is their fire god. They've got 3 goddesses, and they worship Mithra. And this fire worship, the head of the fire worship, the high priest was called Pontifex Maximus, Pontifex Maximus. And Pontifex Maximus means the maximum or the supreme high priest. And he was the high priest, the supreme high priest, and 2 of the Caesars, Numa and Gratian, refused to wear the robes of that system. Well, that was outlawed, and then later on it was reinstituted in the form of the Roman Catholic Church, and that's the deadly wound to one of the heads. Of course, a head was a capital city of an empire, so Rome, being the head of the beast here, was outlawed. It received the deadly wound to the head, a head being a capital city, a mountain being a capital city, and the 7 heads. Turn over to Revelation. Let me show you what most people think. Turn over to Revelation 17. Now, you'll hear men teach on this, and here's what they'll try to tell you. The beast is more than the Roman Catholic Church. When you go to Revelation 17, Revelation 17, here's what a lot of the so-called prophecy teachers will say to you. They'll say that in verse 9, here's the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Well, most people come up and say, well, Rome is the city of 7 hills. Therefore, this is the Roman Catholic Church. Well, how can a hill, if it's a city that sits on 7 literal hills, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, which one of those hills was wounded to death? Right. It's silly. It's ridiculous.